Welcome to the Library Love Fest podcast. I'm Virginia Stanley.
I'm Lainey Mays.
And Essie Ramirez.
We are the library marketing team at HarperCollins Publishers.
Join us every week as we present buzzworthy books through author interviews, conversations with editors, and expert opinions from librarians like you.
Enjoy the show.
Book Buzz, HarperCollins Book Buzz. Check it out. Do-do-do, Book Buzz, HarperCollins Book Buzz. Brought to you by Library Love Fest.
Hi, it's Lainey. Welcome back to the Library Love Fest podcast. I'm very excited to be joined today by Lucia Macro, Vice President and Executive Editor at William Morrow. Hi, Lucia.
Hi.
Welcome back. You've been on the podcast several times. And
several times. Yeah. It's always so fun.
I know. And so I'm excited to hear who you've brought this time. So I'll hand it off to you.
Okay. Well, today I have brought Emiko Jean, and I am so excited to welcome her and to introduce you all to her. Or maybe some of you know her already because Emiko is also the New York Times bestselling author of the young adult novel Tokyo Ever After and also Tokyo Dreaming. But we are here to talk about MIKA in Real Life. And this is coming August 2nd from William Morrow Books. So welcome, Emiko. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I think all writers, I started as a prolific reader, and that was fostered and began in my local library. So I'm thrilled to be here and to be talking to you and to talking to librarians.
I know. And I do want to talk about the book, but I will echo what you said about the libraries. As everybody knows, I grew up in libraries. So I'm always happy to be here and introduce some of my favorite writers and books to librarians. So let's just jump right in and talk about MIKA in Real Life, a book that I just adore and cannot wait to share with the wider world. And I just want to start, I often start with this question because I always find it a very interesting, everybody's answer is a little different. It's so interesting, which is, how did you get started in writing? What drove you to, the very steady and lucrative profession of writing?
Lucrative.
And steady.
Yeah. So I always loved reading, as I just said. I loved reading. And I remember at a very young age reading books and not seeing myself in them. So there weren't Japanese American characters, and I didn't ever read anything either by an Asian American author either. So I loved reading, and I always remember I liked writing too, but I never connected those two things together, that I could actually be a writer and produce something for readers, because I had kind of been eliminated from that space. I didn't see myself in that space. And so I just never thought it was a path for me. And so I would kind of write on my own and very privately. And I did that for a really, really long time. And I didn't turn to actually considering writing as a career until I was almost 30. I was working a variety. You'll see from my bio, I have a ton of odd jobs that I worked. And I think that just points to that I wasn't on the right path. And I was working at a job at that time that I was deeply unhappy at. And I remember opening up my emails and writing chapters of a book into the body of my email and then sending them to myself. So I was pretending to work at this job. And that eventually became a book, a really, really terrible book. And I did try to get representation for it. And a lot of agents wisely said no to it because it was so bad. But that's when I first got that taste and that feeling of being really fulfilled. And I knew that's what I wanted to do. That's when I really made it a goal to become a published author. So then I started to kind of look at what I wanted to write next and be a little bit more purposeful with it and outline and do a kind of a loose outline for it, and really try to get it in shape to get an agent and then eventually submit it and get it published.
Mm-hmm. I find that is often, I mean, people who are writers are just, they're writers at heart. It's as if they are just compelled to write or called to write. It's like I said, it's always so fascinating to me to hear each writer's journey is a little bit different, but there's always that kind of thing in common. And it's interesting. I was going to touch on this later, but you've opened the door, so I'm going to start now, which is, you were talking about how you didn't see books with characters like yourself. And I feel like the cultural identity and a cultural journey is such an integral part of MIKA in Real Life. There's so many themes in this book that I want to talk about, but that's one of them. I really would like you to kind of expand on and touch on a little bit further, because we have Mika, and she's the central character, obviously, of the novel. And she had given up a daughter. I don't want to give too much of the plot away. She had given up a child for adoption. The child is half Japanese, I believe, and half white. And so I think, culture and also Mika's relationship with her mother herself, it's such an integral part of the book. And I found it, fascinating and touching. And if you could touch upon that a little bit.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't really have a question, but I think it's a great theme to talk about.
It's so interesting. I had another interview last week, and the interviewee asked me, it was about Mika in Real Life, and in the book, Mika is an artist, and she suppresses her art for a very long time. And it's something that she rediscovers in the novel. And they asked if I had done that too, if I had suppressed my writing.
Wow.
And I had never made that connection before. And so I kind of had like this breakthrough moment where I was like,
yeah, that's really interesting. Like, I never thought of it either.
Wow. Yeah. I know. It was, like I said, it was kind of an aha moment, because I really it had been something that I had buried inside of myself, because I essentially, like Mika, didn't have this like permission to pursue this dream. And so I think that it's so funny what kind of like squeezes through the folds of your subconscious and out onto
the page. Yeah.
Page. And that was, that was one of those things. And I think that's why I developed that with her.
Mm-hmm. And this is also a novel. I mean, I also felt that this was also a novel about mothers and daughters.
Yes.
Big time.
Yes.
So complicated. And yeah. I thought it was, well, there were a couple things. The first is, if you could talk a little bit about, there's Mika's relationship with her own mother, which is, I would call, difficult. And then Mika has she develops a relationship with her, long lost daughter, which I think the way I took it was, she seems very determined not to make it the same as her own relationship with her mother. But then she falls into that trap where your kid is kind of your friend. And that doesn't necessarily work out so well. But if you could talk a little bit about, I don't know, just like Mika and her relationship with her mother, and that, I think it's that generational difference that sometimes I know I had it with my own mother. Yeah.
So I had kids. They were, I have twins, and they were 3 years old when I started Mika in Real Life. So it was very much still in kind of like that postpartum haze. And I was also really thinking about my own mother and my own mothering and how I wanted to be a mother and what influences I had, what I wanted to do differently than my parents did. And that's all reflected in this book. I mean, it's an intergenerational book. So it's about, we as women, like what we keep and what we carry and what we pass down to our children. And it's also about kind of dealing with all of that primitive love that we have for them. But sometimes I think it's chained up inside of us, especially with Hiromi, who is Mika's mother. She's very traditional. She has a very traditional marriage where the husband goes out and he works and she stayed home. And, she didn't necessarily want that for herself, but she felt an obligation to do that. And so some of that resentment really seeded itself, and then it grew in the way that she parented Mika. So she tried to have Mika be kind of a foil for herself and to kind of achieve those dreams that she felt like she could never achieve. And their relationship blew up because Mika wanted to go in a complete opposite direction. She didn't want to have this traditional Japanese life. She didn't want to, her mother really enjoyed dancing, odori, and she didn't want to do that. And so it's also about parents kind of reconciling, who their children are supposed to be. And you can't always guide that.
Yeah, I think there's always that disconnect between who you want your children to be, and then they just go off. They just do that thing where they just go off and be whoever they're going to be, which, I know can be frustrating for parents sometimes. I think it was frustrating for mine. And I also loved, this is also a novel of female friendship as well, because Mika has such a great friend in Hannah. Hannah, I always thought that Hannah is like the girlfriend you really just want to have. She's so rock steady, I thought. So there are just so many themes, but I mean, how do you see that relationship between Mika and Hannah?
I think, this book is also about found families. With Hannah, Mika really found what she needed, and what she didn't get from her own mother was kind of this soft place to land every time and to feel really perfectly and unconditionally loved. And that's what Hannah offered to Mika. And Mika also offered it to Hannah. I mean, there's a line in the book where they talk about their friendship and how they were both branches growing from the same crooked tree. I don't remember it exactly, but and that's really, that encapsulates their relationship. They were kind of outliers, and they went to like a special high school where kids went that there wasn't very much expected of them, and so they really bonded over kind of these differences that they felt between their families and also society.
And speaking of found family, I mean, Penny, the daughter in the book, she's unexpectedly found family. And I know you have a background writing young adult, but I love the way Penny is portrayed. And I always wonder, how do you find, because I know I could not write about teenagers. Is it challenging to write about teenagers, and how do you do it? Make their voices sound so authentic, because teen language is so of the moment. I feel like by the time I figure it out, it's like long gone.
Yeah.
Is there a big difference in writing for, the teen market versus, the adult grown-up market?
Yeah, I mean, there's of course differences. I mean, you have to write at different levels for each market. I mean, with Mika in Real Life, it's really an intergenerational story. So it talks about, Mika's mom, and it talks about, Mika's daughter, and I couldn't explore that with a young adult novel. However, I do think, Penny and herself, she could have a whole young adult novel that revolves around her and her experiences, finding her biological mom and being an adoptee. But yeah, she was really a pleasure to write. She was, strong and so enthusiastic and a force of nature. And I think very much the opposite of Mika, who kind of was a little bit more timid in the world. And, Mika has circumstances which made her that way. And because Penny was raised differently than Mika was, she kind of had this ability to be out in the world. And I think all teens do too, where you feel kind of like you're conquering it a little bit, And I remember that feeling that way as a teen, that I was kind of like this force to be reckoned with, and that nothing could ever hurt me. And it's kind of what I tried to bring to Penny, You
have that feeling of you're sort of indestructible when you're a teenager. Or some kids do, I think. And Penny certainly has that. And what do you, and I'm also interested in Penny's relationship with her adoptive father. I mean, that was also so complex, and you know, and then see, like I said, I don't want to give too much of the plot away. It's so hard not to. How did you see Penny's relationship with her father? Do you think she was closer to her father, her adoptive father, than her adoptive mother, or vice versa? Because, her adoptive mother passes away.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I think about, so Penny's adopted father, his name is Thomas, and I think about their relationship and their relationship trajectory. Penny lost her adopted mother at a young age. I think she was 9 or 10 when her adopted mother passed away. So it kind of forced this man, Thomas, into even closer proximity with his daughter, right? Like he also, Caroline, who is the adopted mother, stayed at home and Thomas worked. And so they, in that sense, had kind of a more traditional marriage where it was the mom at home and the dad worked. But it kind of forced him to be both kind of mom and dad, both parents to Penny. And Thomas is pretty rigid. He is a planner. He likes his schedules and structure. And he's been thrown these really big life events that are totally out of his control. First infertility, then his wife dies, and then his daughter takes off to meet her biological mother. So he's kind of been reeling for a really long time.
Poor Thomas.
I feel like he's been trying to catch his breath for a really long time, and Penny won't let him. She keeps kind of throwing punches. And she challenges him, and so he kind of comes along for this ride, but unbeknownst to him, he ends up having to kind of deal with some of his own issues too.
Well, librarians, I just think you are going to love Mika in Real Life. It is, it's the kind of book that your patrons, any of your patrons who want something that's, uplit, but a little more complex, really elegantly written. It is just so, it's heartwarming. It's the kind of book people will talk about. There is a lot to talk about. It's a great book club book. So if you have a library book club, perfect. And also, some of your patrons may know Emiko's work, Tokyo Ever After, which I read and quite loved. So the kids, I'm sure, have read it. So there is a little bit of that YA interest crossover. But this is just, really seriously one of my favorite books of the summer. And it is on sale August 2nd. I just really want to thank you, Emmy, for coming to talk to us. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to the Library Love Fest podcast. For more information on this week's episode, go to librarylovefest.com. Enjoying the show? We would love to hear what you think. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Library Love Fest and on Instagram at Harper Library. Be sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and share the show with a friend. Lastly, if you enjoy our show, we bet you'll enjoy all of the other podcasts from HarperCollins publishers. Find a list of shows at harpercollins.com/podcast. See you next week.